to Super Rugby round 13. What is it? Review. That's what it is. It's a review of what's happened for the weekend. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. Welcome to the best place for rugby predictions and opinion. Yes, don't worry. The guys who are going to do the actual show are going to be much better sort of prepared and know what they're saying than I am. So I will hand you straight over to them. But do join me in the live chat during the show live, and obviously join me back here at 8 p.m. tomorrow night for the for Hash Rugby chat as well. But this evening, I will hand you over to Steve. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, very, very well, thanks. Good to have everyone back and ready to go for the round 13 review. Get it around the right way for this week, Paul. Round 13, yes, of course, we had 7 matches to go through. So let's not mess about. Let's dig straight into it, because 7 games is always a long weekend. There's a lot to talk about, as per always. So we'll start off where it all began on Friday night with the Blues up against the Hurricanes, and 100th match for old James Parsons, who seems to be around the track a million times in 10. He has played his 100th Blues game, which is quite an achievement for the hooker to do that for the Blues. But the game started off with plenty of early chances inside the opening 10 minutes, and it took a while for the Blues to get anything out of it. Tuipulotu bulldozing his way through defenders before offloading to little man Sam Knock under the sticks, and the Blues are off to a good start to the game, and they dominated, you'd say, the early period of the match. 20 minutes of huge pressure from the Blues, and the Hurricanes get one little sniff back the other way. A turnover at the ruck from Laumape, pops it off to Lamb, and, well, Ben Lamb going through the Blues defence like it was thin paper up against a nuclear missile, and all that work from the Blues was quickly undone, and we were all tied up back where we began at 7 points all. The game took a big swing after that back towards the Hurricanes. They got more territory, and they took their turn in the lead. The Barrett brothers linking up inside the 22, and the good form continues for Geordie Barrett, who slides over to give the Hurricanes a 14-7 half-time lead. And this one seemed very similar to the Highlanders game a couple of weeks ago, where the Blues started off really well, but faded as the match wore on. And that's what we're seeing here today as well against the Hurricanes. Jeff Tumunga Allen set the first yellow card of the weekend after a big run of penalties as the Blues set about building another small township inside the Hurricanes 22. They took 20 minutes to do it, but it was impressive little houses there inside that Hurricanes area. And after error and mistake and stupid plays from the Blues, they finally managed to turn it into some points in the corner. Dalton Popilii scoring, and the conversion failed to go over. So that gave the Hurricanes a slender lead, 14-12, with 19 minutes to play, a lot closer than many people would have expected. Against run of play for the 3rd time in a row, off a Blues scrum, Beauden Barrett plays thief in the night, intercepting, and as we know, once he's in the clear, there is no stopping that man, and he was gone. 19-12 Hurricanes lead. They got a late penalty to seal the deal, putting it up to 22-12. Hurricanes doing the job over the Blues. Shane, an interesting start to the weekend. The Hurricanes probably a bit pushed more than they would have liked there against the Blues.
Yeah, and look, it's always good to see the Blues having a crack, and well done to James Parsons, 100 caps. It seems like he has been, as you said, around forever. You can play for the Pirates Rugby Club when you retire from the Blues, mate. We need some players at the moment.
Oh,
but
scraping bottom of the barrel there, mate.
But I've got to say, I've got to say this word, yes. Yes, and why? The Hurricanes. The Hurricanes, because I want to see a team start to stand up to the other New Zealand teams obliquely won from Christchurch. And they are starting to put some pressure on that table. Obviously not enough, but enough to be an alternative side to really watch other than the Crusaders. So it's good to see the Hurricanes pile on some wins. Good to see them play well with their backs. It's great to see the Barrett brothers in form. And it is, I think the Hurricanes forwards have started to lift their work rate and a few other things over the last few weeks. So it's just been positive things that we're seeing from this side. So good on them. And, good on the Blues too. They haven't given up. They're having a bit more of a crack this year. And that's all you can really ask of them. So that's what I took from that first game, Steve.
Yeah, an interesting one to start off our weekend. The Hurricanes are a team that just seem to do enough to get the victories, don't they? Like has been spoken about in every preview that seems to be around at the moment, they're only losing to one side, and that is the Crusaders this season. So everyone else that comes knocking, they are sending them back where they come from with the points in the bank. So you can't really argue with that. And if they were on a normal sports leaderboard, they'll be sitting second. So they're having a decent little season, although, results like that probably does make the Blues look a little bit better than they actually are. But that is our first game of the weekend. We'll move swiftly on. And this one's for you, Shane, especially for you. I notice you're repping the shirt there. You got it all going on. The Rebels are up against the Reds. And first thing I noticed about this one was the referee. Oh, my good old friend Angus Gardner, who I've given a new name. Anyone who follows me on Twitter will know I now refer to him as Angus Gardner. So that is his new name. He was in control, so I was expecting at least 17 cards of some description, and at some point it would have about 10 versus 11 going on the field. And it didn't take long either, did it? Karevi sent to the bin. He went up for a high ball, collided with Guinea. They both come crashing down, and there we go. See you later, Karevi. First one in the bin, and the Reds are down to 14 men. The Rebels took full toll, though, man up, and they scored the opening try through Corabetti, skinning defenders out wide, and he was very quick to give the Rebels the lead with the man advantage. The Reds took the threes on offer. They stayed in touch throughout the half, but it's the Rebels who were setting it up through the maul, working close to the Reds line to set up their second try. And as the Australians like to do this season, it seems, it was a hooker, Rangi, who dots down to extend the lead. Just before halftime was the Reds, who finally struck in something more than three. Lucas showing some great footwork and a great combination with Tupou down the right-hand side. Lucas picking up a tidy little finish to bring the Reds back into the game. But just when it looked a bit more positive for the Reds, no. Angus Gardner said no. And he sent Higginbotham to the bin this time, collapsing them all on the stroke of half-time. And he was out of the game for the rest of the half and a bit of the second as well. The Rebels didn't manage to take advantage, and off we went to half-time to score at 14 points to 11. The Rebels holding a slender lead, the Reds doing well to stay in the game. Reece Hodge gets a cracker of a ball from Billy Meeks to bust straight off the set piece in the second half, and he was hauled just short, but he popped a good little pass back up, and it was room for the big man, Tetra Faulkner, to truck down in the corner, and the yellow card once again proving costly for the Reds. Average defence for the Reds saw a pretty easy try for the Rebels to extend the lead. Hodge again breaking the line. He was devastating for the Rebels, and he put it through the hands, finding Dane Haylett-Petty with an inside ball and no Red defence in sight, and the score blew out to 24 points to 11. The Reds, though, finally did wake up. Them all got going. They demolished their way past a weak attempt for the Rebels, and it was Harry Hupert who benefited from the work of the pack, 24-18. Surprisingly, it was still game on. The Rebels run down the clock well, though, taking threes, keep the Reds at bay and pushing their lead out over that 7-point margin, and the full-time score 30 points to 24. The Rebels taking the win, but the Reds, Shane, a valiant effort from them despite Angus Gardner doing his best to send them all home early.
Well, I've got to say, Steve, as I always do, if the Reds go down fighting, I see that as a bit of pride in the jumper. That's why I'm wearing the jumper today, because I'm proud of them. They had a crack. It hasn't been an easy few years for the Reds. The last couple have been a lot better than the previous 3 or 4, but certainly you got to hand it to the Rebels. They've had a tough few weeks themselves. They want to get back on track with the conference and pick up the pace a bit, and pick up the pace they did. They got out to about 24-11. It was probably close to bed then. Really proud of the Reds guys. They did get a bonus point penalty goal after the siren to make it respectful. And can I say this? And I know that I'm showing perhaps my little bit of bias here towards the Queensland boys, but in the last few years they would have just given this game up and not fought till the very end. They fought to the very end, and they deserved a bonus point at the very least out of it. So I'm pretty pleased with the effort. It was a lot better than when they played the Rebels a few weeks ago.
I mean, their season's not over yet, is it? They still sit middle of this Australian conference on 23 points. That loss, the Rebels does hurt them, but their 5 points has drifted them now, and of course 6 points drifted the Brumbies, who we'll talk about later on. But still, they're in respectability reasons. They don't want to drop down. It'll be great for them to be able to beat the Waratahs because that big rivalry, New South Wales, Queensland, the old school sort of style there. So they've got a lot to play for. They've got a lot of respectability to get in there as well. So, they're a decent little side that's going to improve. And they did put in a good showing despite a lot going against them in that game against the Rebels. But like I say, the point, very, very valuable for them, is that's their third bonus point now as well. So need a few more of those for the rest of the season. for the poor old Reds. Moving on over to Africa, and here we go. This one was interesting because a lot of people thought after last week with the Crusaders that things could get a bit intriguing over in South Africa where the Bulls were at home waiting for it. So that draw really did making this one a little bit more interesting. The success of the Bulls at home brought it even more that way, and it was the Crusaders, as we expected, who you're always going to go into this one as favourites. Got the lucky bounce of the ball early on, bridge with a little grubber, and it was what's turning out to be the man of the moment. Is definitely this match anyway. Richie Mo'unga, right place, right time, and he follows up to start the scorers off very, very early. Full of confidence, Mo'unga was at again. This one was a cracker of a try, solo brilliance. Just getting the ball up, stepping a couple of defenders, taking a bit of pace, burning players off and stepping them with ease. Takes his personal tally and his team's tally up to 14-0. Richie Mo'unga was running the show. The rest of the Crusaders finally started to get involved as Bridge returned a kick, splitting two defenders and opening up the sea. And good support from Goodhue and eventually Dunshay, who galloped. And there's nothing more you can call it than galloped. He looked like a big old horse out there trotting down the sideline. 30 metres. Determination, taking out a defender with them and bowling over in the corner. The Crusaders were all over this one in the first half. Just before half-time, the Bulls decided that defending the short side was unrequired. And so Kieran Weed went for a little scamper down the sideline, finding the electric pace of Sevu Reece inside him. And he burns over, as he always does as well. A bit like Barrett before. If you get him in space, he is gone. And it was a romp. It was a crushing to the Crusaders at half-time. A couple of Pollard penalties was all the Bulls managed. And a commanding half-time lead to the visiting side. 26 points to 6. One-way traffic for the Crusaders. Sevu Reece got the second half off to a cracking start as well, proving any space is space enough for the guy of his speed. And against a couple of forwards around the breakdown, before you know it, he's in for his second try of the game. The Bulls take a leaf out of the Blues book from earlier in the first game, and they camped inside the Crusaders 22, building another small village. We've got a lot of building going on this week as well, before they finally broke down the defence. Berger Oldendale getting some joy for the Bulls, untouched under the sticks, finally finding somewhere without a defender to get in his way. Normal business resumed soon after their crossfield kick from the Knights' master, Richie Mo'unga, which Sevu Reece took high, flying at speed, and really it was a poor attempt to stop him as well, and he was in for his hat-trick try. The Crusaders forwards got involved near the end, and Elijah Moore spinning back to the blind side. Scott Barrett chiming through, and he just took them all out, didn't he? Taking defenders with him and completing an absolute thrashing in Loftus Shane. No one was stopping the Crusaders here this week, were they? They were tested against the Sharks. They were probably quite annoyed that they didn't get the win last week. They're backlashed here against the Bulls.
Well, I'm quite annoyed they got the draw against the Sharks. I hope they would have actually lost for once. But I tipped the Crusaders this week to bounce back, actually, and they did that. And they did that with no mercy. Just no mercy this side, because they're just full of the talent that you expect from New Zealand rugby. You know, the Crusaders can have one bad game, but they won't slip up in the second. And the Bulls were the team that got the wrath of the scorn. So, you know, brilliant attacking rugby, brilliant defence, obviously. They kept the Bulls to 13, and the Bulls are a pretty dangerous side when they get that running game going. So, look, all in all, another 3-star performance by the Crusaders.
Yep, 45-13, a thrashing. No one really expected it to be that bad. I think the little hope the Bulls had was quickly squashed in that one, and they were put completely to the sword. The Crusaders continuing on their demolition of the New Zealand Conference as well, sitting nicely with a 7-point lead over the second-place Hurricanes, who are on 40 points. So there's a long way back too before the Highlanders are there on 29. So it is big time at the top for the Crusaders and for the Hurricanes, of course. But that does bring us to the end of our halfway point, and enough time for halftime team talk with Paul, the host of the show.
Welcome to the halftime team talk. Yes, and down below there is a link to patreon.com/DrivingMaul, which is where my supporters can go and support the site. Last week I did an exclusive video for them talking about why the Super Rugby was so tight this year. And I've been asked to do a video this week talking about the low attendances in grounds. Is going to be the topic for this week's For Your Ears Only. So go down there, click on that. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That gives you access to all the exclusive videos that I have on there. And I say I'll be talking about the crowd figures or the crowd numbers of all the sides this week.
Interesting. Make sure you get involved. Check it out. Yes. Moving on swiftly on to our next match of the weekend. It was the mighty Highlanders up against the visitors from Argentina, the Jaguares. And we celebrate another 100th game for a team this time. Elliot Dixon notching up the triple figures for the Highlanders. A bit of a stalwart for the side. Good old Southern man as well, making 100 games up there for the Highlanders. But this game, open start, plenty of chances. But the first one was the way of the Jaguares. Cancelliero, the man with the great name. His acceleration, a danger throughout this whole match as well. From a wayward kick away from the Highlanders as well. Grub it out wide, and it was Moroney who finished off the opener. And an early lead for the visiting side was put a dampener on the crowd, who were pretty much full of voices. They always are in Dunedin. The Highlanders had to work hard, though. Long phases to get back in an attacking position. And it was Ioane who split the line and, some say unselfishly, offloading it to Lynch's to score. And then he does all the hard work, but then he scuds an easy kick, which would have brought them back on level picking. So they trailed behind for the conversions, but Aaron Smith was the one to spot space around the breakdown, and he is one in good form that can really make this a dangerous area of the field. Plenty of support with him as well. Tompkinson, who finds it Faddis, who finishes off to finally give the Highlanders the lead after they got back into the game. But straight off the kickoff, an error from a Jags penalty gave the gift straight back to the Highlanders, who again took it very easily. Ioane with another beautiful assist to Tompkinson, who brings the Highlanders back out in front after the Jaguares let that slip. A penalty kick start just 5 minutes out from the Jaguares line, puts the line out more in for the Highlanders, who execute again very, very well. And Liam Coltman this time rumbling over, and the Hookers are having an absolute gem of a season this year, aren't they? Tries all over the place, and the Highlanders were one to take the lead at the break, 26 points to 13. Into the second half, Jaguares inside lines have been given problems all night, but finally it started to pay dividends for them. Kramer slicing through, hardly untouched, and the lead was cut down to less than 7 yet again. The Highlanders turn to taking penalties, keep that scoreboard ticking over and wind down the clock. They took their lead up to 12 points thanks to the boot. So the Jaguares continue to look in fives. And some good hands through the back line. Found the danger man, Moyano, in behind the defence with his speed. Too quick for the chases of Aaron Smith and Ioane, and he cuts the lead back to just 5 points with 15 minutes left to play. The Highlanders tried to give the Jaguares as many chances as they could. There was mistakes, there was poor kicks, but they didn't manage to finish any of them despite the good form that the two sides had shown earlier. And they played some good old Southland, pass it one off and just fall on the floor and then let the clock tick down as the ruck played out. And the Highlanders held out in the end, 5 points only difference, 32-27. A tight one. The Jaguares playing well on the road, Shane. It's a good sight to see.
It's fantastic, Steve. And firstly, well done to Elliot Dixon, 100 caps for the Highlanders. He's a real champion of that club, it's great to see the Argentinian sides play so well against the New Zealand sides. They've really stepped up a gear this year. In fact, they've won one and they've had 2 bonus point losses out of the other 2. Very respectable results. The Highlanders probably, could have done a little more damage after half time if they really put their mind to it with a few other things, and the Jags could have easily probably won that game in the end too, the way they'd started to fall on top. But let me say this: that wasn't a bad game of rugby at all. That was not a bad game of rugby. That was a good way to start Saturday. 5 points is probably a fair reflection in the end of where the two teams were. So, well done to the Highlanders. Well done to the Hugs. They're really having a crack, and, looking forward for next weekend.
They're having a good crack. And, we talk about it every week, the South African Conference. They are right there. Everyone's right there in it, really. Only the Stormers can probably say they're starting to teeter on the edge of existence in there. But, boy, top three sides separated by 1 point, 29, 28, 28. That is crazy close over there. And, I mean, to come away there for losing bonus point for the Jaguares is definitely a massive thing for them. To take a point away from New Zealand tour, great start for them. And they do look good this season as well. Yet again, backing up from much improved years come by now for this side. We'll move on to another team who's desperate for points in both sides of the equation. The Chiefs versus the Sharks. And, boy, this one had a lot riding on it, didn't it? Of course, the Sharks coming off that draw of the Crusaders. Now, the Chiefs, their season has been just an absolute lottery, hasn't it, of all sorts of performances, but mainly poor. And it took a long time and plenty of areas before the Chiefs did finally get the try counter underway. It was Molly with a thunderous run that allowed Mackenzie to set up two Shark defenders who were smashing into each other. And then a little man, Brad Weber, with the little wheels that just go like little toothpicks through the grass, and he ran away to grab his opening try and the first of the matchup as well. The Sharks, though, followed that up with a perfectly executed way of how to chase a kick, a box kick. Not too many fans of this, but Louis Schroeder kicking it high, a catch messed up from Alomalo, who was a bit indifferent at the start, chased perfectly from Nkosi, who popped it off to the big man, Hiron Andrews. This guy is a giant, and what a sight it was to see him ploughing down the field for another 30-metre scamper for a forward. That was a great try to see, and it was all tied up. A fantastic try and a reply from the Sharks just after the commentators have been talking them down about not scoring a try on their tour so far. So that was quickly a slap in the face for those guys. The Chiefs replied pretty much straight away. A line out, 10 metres out, a little set play through the back line, some rapidly recycled ball from Anton Leonard-Brown. The Sharks defence doesn't recover, it doesn't set itself up, and it's an easy run-in for Karpik, who put the Chiefs into the lead into halftime, 17-13 over the Sharks. Took 15 minutes to get going in the second half, but it comes away with a yellow card. And you got to say, in this match, I will give credit to the ref because he took a lot from these players. And there's been a bit going on after this match about how much was let go and how many cards there could have been if our good friend Angus Gardner was actually in charge of this one. There would have been probably 5-on-5 at this case. But he did well, and I guess he was pushed too far on this occasion. So it was a yellow card sitting off. Was Harris who was sent off. Cynical penalty. It was Mapimpi who was in a really good position to actually get himself near or scoring a try for the Sharks, who are in a good spot as well. Given that, it was set back up the maul for the Sharks, and they drove over through Botha, who took the lead back for the Sharks. And they were lucky to score as well, because another penalty like that, or if that try didn't go over, it would have been possibly a penalty try or another yellow card possibly for the way that that was taken by the Chiefs. They turned the tide, though, as we head towards the final 10. The Chiefs, didn't they? They really stepped it up again, getting in close to the Sharks line with the pack before rolling it out wide to Anton Leonard-Brown, who drags defenders over with them and brings the Chiefs within 1 point. The kick was astray, and at that point, many heads did drop in the crowd as they thought they might not have enough to get the job done here against the Sharks. But step in one man, Nankivell, straight off the kickoff. The Chiefs pop it out, one out, and straight through his own 22. Add pace, splits the line, and away they go, the Chiefs. Elo Marlow in support. Bosch drags him in. He offloads beautifully to Weber, who was again in the right place at the right time. He started it off, and he's finished it off as well. A thrilling finish to the game that went deep in over the 80th minute. The Chiefs hold tight against some really desperate Sharks attack. They did enough in the late flurry, enough to get the job done for the Sharks, for the Chiefs, I should say, against the Sharks. 29-23. Another close one. The Chiefs just doing enough, though, to get it done. That last little stanza was powerful from the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was. It was a telling blow, but only just. You know, a desperate tackle here. I think there was a sprint upfield by one of the Sharks fellas, and big Canadian chap. He made sure he ankle tapped him and got him in time, and he played well. Big Tyler Ardron, I think he's probably one of the buys of the season, actually, in Super Rugby. He's played really well. The Sharks, they seem to play really well against New Zealand sides. They're actually the best South African side I've seen play against the New Zealand sides. Now, I think the better side won in the Chiefs. Only marginally, though, because the Sharks have been really good on this tour. They were unlucky to get the win last week in Christchurch. They pushed the Chiefs for 83 minutes, so they'll definitely be fit next week with the extra game time. But, you know, you come out, your big guns sometimes aren't always the people that win it. It's the unsung heroes. And while Brad Weber is certainly a big name player and those sort of things, but it's these players that the Chiefs have got. They probably don't have the best depth in terms of the other New Zealand sides, but they're starting to build on that, and they've had to with D-Mac out for the rest of the year, I believe it is, and things like that. So the Chiefs will take a lot of heart from that, and I hope the Sharks realise that they can be proud of their efforts in New Zealand.
Yep, the poor old Chiefs though. They've got a good man to rely on, number 10 though. Good old Southlander and his brother Marty McKenzie. Yes, who Paul completely wrote off at the start of the year as desperate times if Marty has to start. Well, look who's leading the Chiefs now, Paul. It's good old Marty McKenzie. I'll never let you forget. We'll move swiftly on. No,
everyone else is crocked and in hospital.
It's still Marty. It's still Marty leading the way for the old Chiefs. You can't take that away from him. Going back over to South Africa, the Lions are up against the Waratahs, and it was not very long it took to get underway this one. The Waratahs quickly into their work, 3 minutes in, and a poor pass finding no one started at all when it was Carmichael Hunt who went back to fetch it and offload while getting hammered to Clark. And another good scrum half line. We've seen a lot with Weber in the last match, but this time it was Nick Phibbs who found his way inside to score to open things up for the Waratahs, who started off with a bit of a flurry. The Lions, though, only took a couple of minutes after that to reply. All sparked from another line-out, number 9 scrum half pass, looking to his back line. Malcolm Marks says, I'll have that, and he scampered away with it. Didn't back himself fully, though, which I thought was a bit of a disappointment. He took the tackle, the Lions toiled away, and after a few phases later, gaining the advantage, inside ball from Yankees to Deante, and they were back in the game. The Lions scoring their first try to level it back up. Quickly back into it, though, 2 minutes further on. And another one had been ticked up. The Waratahs were at it again. A dummy that was sold really cheap as chips from Michael Hooper, because everyone seemed to want to buy a piece of it, and they were all in the stands looking for where they could get it. Allowed them to scoot away and score one back to the lead for the Waratahs. A dummy that I've never seen so many players buy in my life. Unbelievable. We'd hardly passed the 15-minute mark of the match, and the Lions brought it back again. This time, Levis and his forwards dominating close to the Waratahs line. Too powerful to stop, and he bowled over to bring it level yet again. We did get a little break, though, from scorers. About 10 minutes between them this time, and the Waratahs were back in the action. Second phase off a scrum. Fast line from Simmons, who went straight through a massive crater of a gap between a couple of players in the tight 5, and he just thunders away to put the Waratahs back in the lead again. And finally, we'd had some good tries, but we got a stunner. Harold Vorster floating across field, just looking for a gap, a bit like we see from a guy like Damien McKenzie. And then he straightens, splits the line in half, grubbers a little beautiful ball through for Quagga Smith, who we know is a bit of an expert, sevens specialist, of course, who finds himself only chaser there. Great little try, X factor, and that's what Vorster brought to that. And we went to halftime with the Waratahs leading slenderly, 21-19 over the Lions. Into the second half, the Lions got into their work, and seeing they stepped up again following that try from Quagga Smith. And the cracker, just before the break, was bettered quickly after, and it was all the forwards as well. Warren Whiteley finding space out wide. Then he links up to Levis, who draws out Marks into the open before he steps it back. And it's not a bad one as well for Marks to run away. He gets it to Skozan. He finds a good back in space, and it puts the Lions back in front again. Multiple key players, but the big thing for this play was they took in 2 defenders at a time, and that got over, and a great try, I think, for the Lions to put them back in the driving seat. The scrum was a good platform for the Waratahs in this match, and a solid break from Curtis Rona finds Tom Staniforth, who drives through the defence to score. And yet again, another lead change. The Waratahs are back out in front. And then it took nearly 70 minutes. How about this? Not often we say this, but for the first penalty attempt of the day, almost 70 minutes. And it was slotted by Reynolds, who put the lead back to the Lions yet again. This one is hard to keep up with, I tell you. Brendan Foley took a stab at a 45-metre droppy to get the lead back, but he missed it. And the Waratahs pretty much under the pump for the rest of the match as they tried to fight to keep it alive. They did keep it alive, but they didn't get back into the game, and the Lions hung on nicely. 29-28. My goodness, Shane. Toppy, Turvey, everyone got the lead. It was was all over the shop.
Well, you'd think that I'd have a little bit of sympathy for the Tars, but I don't. You know, they played well, to be honest with you. And you know, I think that I was a little bit critical, you know, Steve, when we previewed the Australian Conference right at the start of this year of Carmichael Hunt. Well, some Australians can get it wrong. He's played outstandingly. I thought he was probably the best. And I've seen of him this year. And you know what? I've been critical of Beale. Beale stepped it up in the last 3 weeks. He's had his 3 best games in the last 2 years. So, look, there are positives for the Tars to take out of this. They would have liked to have come back from South Africa with a win. That's not to be. You know, they had their chances to put this one away. They didn't quite do that. I'm not going to blame the referees, although there was an 11-2 penalty count to the Lions, because I think that the Tars, you know, have to take the advantage of the chances they've got. And the Lions did just enough. They took, as you'd mentioned, the one penalty of the game on the 70th minute to get the points in this one. So, well done to the Lions. The Tars were not too bad, but we've got a bit of work to do to catch up in the conference now.
Yeah, you're right. You spoke about the referee, Mr. Seconds, didn't he? Copped a bit of flack after that one as well for pushing players around, pushing guys out of the top of rucks and all sorts of little, I don't know what you'd call it, things that he got up to in their match. Yeah, a bit weird, but we'll see if we see him again in Super Rugby. A lot of calls that he'll be departing. If only that could happen to Angus Gardner. Oh, well, we'll move on. Moving on, last game of the weekend. This one shouldn't take too long. Paul's got a comment. What do you got to say?
Okay, I'm just bringing it up on screen now. But the biggest thing about this game on Sunday was it was Mother's Day. So, it was, they put the mothers' names of all the players on their backs. We spent the game basically, or a bunch of us spent the second half on Twitter listing or figuring out the names of all the mums. So on screen now is a list of all the mums for the Brumbies. So happy Mother's Day to all of them, including number 7, whose mum was called Bossy, apparently. Yes, that was and number 5, whose mum's name is Ratty. So there we go. Just that to me was the highlight of this game.
You're not wrong, because it wasn't too much other highlights going on, that's for sure. But I think for the Brumbies, they can take a lot from this game, because what I noticed from this is it's been a long time since we could say something positive about a Brumbies backline. Despite the talent that you look at it and you read it and you say, yes, they've got good guys. Lealiifano, of course, you know, a bit of a legend now around Australian rugby. They've got Spates, they've got Kurandrani, especially that last one. There's a guy who was really good, a highly rated player a few years ago. He was one of the best in the world, and we haven't seen much from him recently. This game, he came alive, and he was my standout player definitely of this match, and he got things started straight away. Kurandrani, he sparked the 2 tries inside the opening 20 minutes of pretty much Brumbies domination. On the right-hand side, devastating with his old buddy Henry Spate, who we already talked about. He benefited from the first, and it was Joe Powell, the young upcoming scrum half, who dominated for the second. And both started with Kurandrani, both coming down the right-hand side. And the Brumbies, well, they were controlling everything, weren't they, really? It took a while for the Brumbies, and I was surprised it took this long for them to go to the maul, but it was just over halfway through the half, and there it is. We've got it going, and surprisingly, you might say as well, they were actually forced to use the backline. The Sunwolves defending it well enough, and Lealiifano puts a long ball wide for Spates, who grabs a second, so everyone was drawn into the maul. Henry Spate hit a free run and out wide. We went to half-time, 19-0. Scoreboard probably not reflecting how dominating this was for the Brumbies. The scrum got them going in the second half, and it had all day long, but they thrilled the crowd with a set play special. Spate hitting the line at pace, slicing straight through, popping it over the top of the cover defence to Tom Banks, who slides in for yet another Brumbies try. Sunwolves toured around the Brumbies line for what seemed an age, trying to get something, but they got nothing out of it. And very quickly, as you like, a bit like we talked about the Hurricanes in the first match, they turn it over. An intercept out wide, hack downfield. They smash anything the Sunwolves seem to put up against them, and a big offload from Kurandrani yet again. He puts in Pete Samu for an easy runaway and a bit of a sucker punch against the Sunwolves, who were really focusing everything to try and get something out of the match. But once again, not for the first time this season, it was Zippo, the donut, nada for the Sunwolves, 33-0. The Brumbies all over this, Shane. It was probably one of the lowest points for the Sunwolves this year.
Along with the game they played against the Highlanders a couple of weeks ago, where, again, the Highlanders kept them to 0 as well. The donut that Homer would like to eat, no doubt. And, there was no man from Snowy River to rein the colt that got away this time. They got away from the Sunwolves. They got out to 19-0 at half-time. They put another couple of tries to put the game to bed afterwards. So, Spate and Kurandrani, I love watching Tavita play because he does play good games. I know that they've said inconsistency. It's the best I have seen him play since 2014, when he carved up against the Springboks in Perth, and then a few weeks later in a narrow loss to the All Blacks, where he was man of the match that night. So he's a very, very dangerous player when he's on song, and he was singing a mighty fine song against the Sunwolves. The Brumbies needed that. I actually think they will start to open up the Australian Conference now, and they will win it. I'm not so confident about the Rebels now. I think that with no more games against New Zealand sides, I think the Brumbies are looking a lot more confident. Not that they weren't, they've beat the Chiefs and the Blues themselves, but now that they've got not that added pressure of a Trans-Tasman derby, they'll get stuck in, and I think we've started to see who will win this conference and take an Australian team to the final. So the Brumbies, the horse is now starting to bolt.
Yeah, it was. I don't think the scoreline fully reflected this game. I don't think it reflected how dominant the Brumbies actually were, because this was one-way traffic, bar that little passage at the end where, I like the comment in the chat says, everyone was kind of wanting this. The Sunwolves get something out of this game just for a little bit of entertainment value, just so you don't feel so bad for them. But the Brumbies had none of it all. They completely shut them out. It was dominating performance. It really was all one-way traffic. And that does wrap up round 13 for us as well, with a bit of a creaming to finish from our 7 matches this weekend. But thank you for tuning in and joining us. I'll flick you back over to Paul and wrap us up.
Thank you everyone who joined me in the live chat. We had, probably the most predictable weekend of rugby we've had for an awful long time. Thank you very much, Steve and Shane, for taking us through all that action. You saw their Twitter handles online, so get on and have a chat with them on there. Also, this coming Saturday for the Chiefs, sort of the Blues versus the Chiefs, I will be down with Stephen, not Steve, a different person, at the Zone Sports Bar in Hamilton. And we'll be doing a pre-match show, halftime show, and full-time show. So come down to the bar; it's free entry, and come and join us. And also, this Saturday is my birthday, so come and say hi, wish me happy birthday. Thank you, everybody.
HB, dude.
Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.